opening keynote, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Northampton, Nick Petford.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you for the invitation to kick off this conference in 2019 on the important role of leadership at the intersection between organisational culture and technology, in particular around the idea of digital transformation, which is a theme, I hope, running through this conference. Indeed it is. There's lots of case studies here, which is great. So it's a privilege to be asked to tell our story of digital transformation. In short, in 2012, we set out to design from scratch a 21st century university based on the best of the traditional approaches to teaching and learning, mixed up with what we thought HE needed to be. Now, it took 6 years, and it took £330 million to achieve, but in autumn 2018, we opened the new Waterside campus on time and ahead of budget. One of the largest university relocation projects for decades in the United Kingdom. And as you can imagine, it was not without its trials and tribulations, and I'll share some of that as this talk progresses. Incidentally, what you're watching on the screen now is 26 months of build from June 2016 to August 2018, condensed into 140 seconds. It's what 350 million quid buys you, basically. So the talk is in three parts. I'm going to start off with something about the vision behind the campus. Why did we decide to do this? What motivated us? Something about the second part, about the changes in learning and teaching we developed in tandem with the physical estate that you can see speedily growing in front of your eyes. And finally, new developments. What do we need to do to stay cutting edge in this digital world? Because we think we're right at the forefront, and I'll give you some evidence of what that means as the talk goes on. But how do we stay there? How do we stay right at the sharp end of all of this? So running throughout all of this are ideas around delivering quality in the student experience, this idea of sort of transformative leadership, if you like, workforce skills, and of course the important diversity issue as well. So our vision and philosophy was this. Around about 2012, I think we realised, like perhaps most of you in the room, there's going to be a whole bunch of disruption rapidly coming towards higher education, as we've seen in other industries, publishing, music and all the rest of it. There's absolutely no reason why universities should be any different to any other industry sector, and clearly that they're not. Right? So what is that? It looks like competition for students, that's hotting up. Cheaper alternatives, private providers coming in, doing what we do, perhaps better, more cheaply. It's a risk, isn't it? And this idea of online delivery, we sort of passed slightly through the excitement around MOOCs, but there's still a massive role to play in online and all the rest of it. So we thought long and hard about a new model that would add value to the on-campus experience with support from personalised teaching and digital learning. And our strategy is pretty clear about this. In fact, this is our strategy. It's just one page. That's it. It's three things. Being really supportive for staff and students. It's about adding social impact in what we do, and it's about being future focused, like looking out to that future. There's some challenges. One of them that we identify here to be future focused is this notion of digital disruption. That feeds through to what do we need to do about it? Well, we need to get better at using data more effectively, more efficiently across the entire organisation. Why would we want to do that? So we can transform to this digital world and fulfill our mission. It's not rocket science, pretty straightforward. Those three things link up to our notion of being future focused. So this is a kind of intellectual piece behind why we did what we decided to do. And there's a bit more detail behind it, obviously. This notion of digital transformation is an interesting one. So around about 2012, 2014, we started to grapple with this, and it breaks down bluntly to three kind of areas. Rethinking students from the bottom up, okay? Rethinking how we deal with them in terms of education, and looking then at the organisational structure that will support those changes. Those three things have to work together and integrated in tandem. So The student piece could be about the decision-making process, how we record student data, etc. Generation Z, well, that's hyped up, isn't it? Beyond hype. Who are these new Generation Z students coming through? Well, you've probably got a couple in your house. I've got my youngest daughter's here, actually. She's one of them, for sure. They do see the world slightly differently. They're not tech-savvy, but they're tech-networked. You know, they multitask on loads and loads of devices. Most of them don't have a clue how it works, but they don't particularly care. But this idea that they have to be online, switched on all the time is one that we need to take account of, I think. In terms of the educational side, this idea of digital, sort of bring your own devices, on-the-go, social learning, you know, why should you just be like you are now, stuck in this room with me for 35 minutes, me just talking at you? You know, it's not that interesting, is it? Even now, probably some of you are drifting off. And we know humans can only, 20 minutes, isn't it? It's about your attention span, and yet we persist, don't we, in universities, drumming in 300-400 in a massive lecture theatre, sort of like industrial scale teaching and learning. There's got to be a better way. What about the future of work? And how do we train students for jobs that aren't invented yet? I'm sure there's thoughts on that. And this idea of unbundling, the 3-year degree, why don't we chunk it up and sell it off in packages? Do it differently. And what's the role of technology in allowing that to happen? Then the organisation, what's the structure like? Universities are pretty clunky things, aren't they, by and large? How do we make them more agile, more lean? What about the skills that we need to make this to happen? And how do we define what is core and non-core business? Two things in particular we focus on, and we'll be guiding the rest of this talk. That's the idea of this digital. How do we come up with a new teaching and learning model based around a digital transformation? And that, what skills do you need across the workforce to allow this actually to happen? It's also skills for students as well. How do you enhance their digital skills in a world of jobs not yet invented? Final thing, and I'm going to break into a little video now. Let's all cross our fingers, hope it works. Always a great irony, isn't it? You come to a conference on technology in universities and the stuff don't work, but we'll see. Partners, who do we buddy up with? Because we can't do this stuff on our own. It's too big for one university, perhaps too big for partner universities. We need different experiences, different skills coming in. I'm going to show you a very brief case study. It's about 3 minutes, which is about what we did with one partner, and that partner is Cisco Systems. This is not an advertisement for Cisco, by the way. I'm not in their pay, right? But they were a partner that we have worked with, and they've helped us put in the software-defined network that I'll be talking about a bit later. This sort of sets the scene, and this video was filmed before we'd moved into Waterside. So this is all kind of aspirational stuff, right? What happened now hadn't happened when we filmed this around about 2016, 2017.
Our mission is to transform lives and inspire change. We want to make people the best they possibly can be when they come here to study with us. Well, the modern student are networked individuals. They consume information in ways that I certainly didn't as a child. So that brings with it expectations and challenges for educational establishments.
Students expect to be able to work and interact in a certain way. We have to be able to reciprocate that.
And how do you cater for this new digital generation of students who might want to learn and consume education in a different way? Universities need to experiment, need to try and do things differently, and of course technology is a great enabler in disrupting education in ways that are positive for the student experience. We're relocating 2 campuses into one brand new purpose-built university.
The new campus at Waterside has been designed to meet currently changing requirements from students.
We started to think about how the technology could be interwoven from day one. The team at Cisco have been heavily involved in the project as we've built the physical aspect of the university. At the same time, we've been able to embed the IT directly in it.
From a Cisco technology and solution perspective, we're utilising them from edge of our network through to the data centre. We're bringing in UCS, and from a networking perspective, we're looking at DNA as well as the software-defined access capabilities within that.
We've used technology as a disruptive innovator. We're pioneering a new model. It pulls together some different aspects of how teaching and learning is being increasingly delivered. You move away from kind of sage on the stage, talking at students, to something which is much more bespoke. We call that active blended learning, and that's a combination of digital resources online and face-to-face. It will be the cornerstone of all of our teaching and learning at Waterside.
The technology we're deploying with the security elements that we're implementing within the network, it means that students will be able to work effectively in a secure way. And as basic as that seems, it's a fundamental need.
A really important part of the project, linking the estates and the IT, is to be future-proofed. That ties in with our idea of being the #1 university in the UK for digital technologies. That statement could be a hostage to fortune if you didn't have the capability to keep on evolving as the technology evolves.
This project will change the game for the university, primarily by providing an intelligent platform. We will then be able to, working with Cisco, look at using that intelligent platform and the software-defined capabilities with SDA to layer in more personalised services that will add value to our students.
We're going to be a different kind of university, far more in tune with the wants and needs of the next generation of students, and we do have the capability to keep on evolving as the technology evolves. That requires a team of experts around you, including people like Cisco, who are at the forefront of technology and allow us and enable us to move with the times.
So that was our thoughts on all of this before we'd actually moved into the Waterside campus. So one part of the organisation is developing, let's get out of there quickly, it's going to crop up next. So one part of the organisation is developing the infrastructure, estates, and at the same time we're thinking, how are we going to fill it with IT, and what's the teaching and learning method going to be like? One thing we didn't do was build any big lecture theatres. Right, the biggest theatre we got takes 80 people, right, 80. So it's a different kind of model. We did that purposely because big lecture theatres, in my opinion, are just boring. Right? Bluntly, that was it. That was the decision. It wasn't particularly deeply thought through, but I've been in them, so have you, and you'll probably reflect that view. So we came up with this notion of this idea of active blended learning. So this is the second part of the talk. What is the new learning and teaching model that we developed in tandem with the estate development? Well, we call it active blended learning. And what that means is there's two parts to it. The active learning, so the chart on the right-hand side, what is active learning? Well, active learning is the antithesis of this, right? This is passive learning, if anything. You're writing a few notes. There's no interaction, you're just writing and scribbling and watching. Right? Passive learning. Active learning is when we would consistently break up the discussion after a few minutes and then engage. Right? So that's the notion of active. It works best, obviously, in practical classes. Practical classes is a great example of active learning. But there's really good data out there, and this is the slide on your, the two charts here from a study that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2014. The biggest ever metadata study on traditional learning versus active learning, where you're more participative. Two bars on there, failure results. Look at the lecture, okay, failure results from a normal broadcast style lecture, passive learning. In this particular sample, this is from bioscience students across all of North America. Tens of thousands of case studies here. Around about 30%. Active learning, the failure rate drops. Right? So all of a sudden it makes more sense, doesn't it? Why would you not want to use a teaching and learning method that has better outcomes? And if you look at the test results, again, look at the blue line, active versus lecture, the scores are better. So you get lower dropout rates with active learning and you get better outcomes for the students. So that's great. That's what active learning means. And what we did, we combined that with blended learning. So the blended learning diagram on your right-hand side there, that's this idea of face-to-face with online. Those two things, active plus blending, equals our new model, active blended learning. Okay, and the two components, in a bit more detail, the active learning stuff is experimental, it's practical, hands-on. As much as possible, real-world oriented, collaborative, a lot of time for reflection. The blended piece, of course, is what a lot of you will be interested in, the technology enhanced side. Face-to-face critical, but with this notion of digital literacy, baked in right at the curriculum level. Right? So all of our outcomes across the university need to demonstrate how they're delivering on the students' skills in terms of digital literacy. And that's part of the project. And the model breaks down into four pieces. There are 4 stages. There's digital resources, which are online. There's no point putting a whole bunch of stuff up on your notes on PowerPoint up there and expecting them to think you've done digital. Or this, he's filming me, right? This isn't digital, right? You can stick it online and you might want to watch it or not subsequently. That's not digital, that's just ancient technology, basically. So and also, the digital piece needs to be linked in with sense-making. Right? You've got to have tasks wrapped up with the digital, and that's hard work, right? It's not easy to do. Digital resources, tasks for making sense, online and face-to-face. Then the lecture, or whatever we want to call it, is the analysis and discussion and goal setting. Then the students go away and they consolidate action planning, and then they come back to the beginning of the digital resources piece. So that's how we developed the active blending learning model across nearly all of the university. And we had a key metric. We call this getting Waterside ready. So we started this process in about 2015, and we had key targets. A KPI was how many courses, modules across the university are Waterside ready, quote unquote, along active blended learning. We drove it through ruthlessly across the organisation. So by the time we got to Waterside, we were ready because we couldn't be anything other. You know, if you're still teaching 300 kids in a big auditorium, well, you can't anymore because you haven't built one. So you have to do this process, right? There was a deep necessity to get it right, which does focus minds. Doesn't always work in every area. We've got a tannery at University of Northampton, only working tannery in Europe. Here's some students doing some tanning stuff on an animal hide. She's polishing it off there. You can't make this, it's very hard to make this digital, right? This is pure practical stuff. There is a digital component to this, though, which is research-based, and that's when the animal hide, where it comes from across the world, it needs to be, there's an idea about traceability. It's the same with food. Right? It's a premium if you can prove that the animal came through a supply chain that actually looked after the creature when it was alive. Right? So, and you can use blockchain technology, to start looking at how you can trace these hides around the world. And so even a very practice-based, like leather, has a really strong digital, in fact, an innovative digital side to it, which is the idea of blockchain in the supply chain. So the Smart Campus Centre, what have we got? It's built 330 million quid, 21st century teaching, all the stuff that you'd expect to see on the website. Low environmental impact, that was important as well. I'll say something briefly about that in a second. This is what it looks like inside. I took this photograph yesterday. So downstairs, this is one of the main buildings, so very open, lots of natural light coming through. Every space in there is a teaching and learning space, right? Those chairs there, that's a teaching and learning space. These things here, right? They're teaching and learning spaces. The more formal lectures are taking place up on the first floor. Can you see where the screens are saying barcode? They're the lecture rooms, right? At the same time, we've got a big arts display taking place. And we've got students from schools coming in, right? Interacting with our students who are studying fine art. All mixed up together, exciting, vibrant, open, full of light and full of life. Screen technology has been important for us. There's, there's about 25 plasmas making up that one particular screen there. And all of the messaging is coordinated centrally across universities. We've got several thousand of these plasmas across the university, plus a massive one on our energy centre. The whole chimney is a plasma screen, right? So you can get messages out in a coordinated way instantly across the university. So God forbid there was something on, there's a fire or some other disaster, you can tell people straight away, or you just use it blatantly for advertising. You know, what's going on happening in the evening? Student union use it. You have all sorts of stuff, videos running on it. If you can read that from the back, this is one of those you said we did things that the students are walking through. They asked us, they said they wanted to extend opening hours. What have we done? So in the Creative Hub, another part of the university, it's open until 12 o'clock. Midnight. The Learning Hub, in old money it's called a library. We don't have a library really, we call something called the Learning Hub. The Learning Hub is open every day, 24/7, 365 days a year. Right? That's customer service, that's what students want, right? Not what you might want as a librarian. Well, you know, world's moved on, isn't it? It's student focused is really, really important. Not to say that we don't take librarians seriously and their concerns seriously. The environmental side. So on the right, there's a couple of Canadian geese. That is the Waterside. You see the river there. I took that again yesterday. They're a bit of a nuisance, these geese, because they come in dozens and they poo everywhere. So they're not entirely welcome. The point I want to make here is biodiversity. We've got more wildlife here now than we had previously. Right? So we took a brownfield site, and I'll show you a picture of what it used to look like in the 60s, brought it back to life again, massive restructure, innovation, investment in the town, and we've got more living creatures there than we had before. We've got otters
in the river now. There's cormorants there and heron and all the rest of it. I mean, I'm not a wildlife expert. The people, some of our academics who are into habitats really helped with the design phase. And that's important because what it used to look like is that. It was a site of 2 massive cooling towers, coal trucks coming in. All of the power in Northampton town was generated on the site that's now the university. So you can imagine that the ground was slightly contaminated, and that was a problem as we took the project forward. So there, where those cooling towers are now is where those two, the furthest building on your right is, more or less. Okay, so we've really brought it back from the 1960s back into life and back into use. Blending the old with the new, this is a railway shed. This is the only grant we got for this was 1.5 million quid from the English Lottery, or English Heritage, whatever they're called. This is derelict. Beautiful old building if you're into railways and stuff. We put it back to life again. This is now where the student unions are based. The far end, the western end, what you're looking at to your right is a bar. The student union offices are on the eastern side. So that's a nice thing to be able to have done as well. Well, a bit of detail now, so over halfway through. I mean, this is for this next 4 or 5 slides are more technically minded, I guess, who get excited by the techie stuff. And this is where I think with Cisco we've made some interesting innovations. So what's the claim then to be a smart campus? What does it actually mean? And we can all say, yeah, we've got a smart campus. You know, it recognises the number plate of the car when it comes in. It's really smart. You know, well, you can have that, but you can also have a much more embedded structure around this notion of the software-defined network, the SD-WAN. We've got the largest one in any university in Europe. This infrastructure, it's massive. We've only just begun to understand what it can do in an experimental phase. In fact, it's the second largest in Europe, outside British Telecom. Okay? It's a big piece of software infrastructure. Full end-to-end implementation, servers, network, cloud-based, etc. Latest generation of Cisco servers. So on a general day, what we're looking at, traffic, 4,000 to 6,500 connected devices, peaked around about 11,500 devices just after Christmas, and it's running at about 10,500 now. And so that's gives you, and that's not just in the university, that's across all of the halls of residence as well. We use a system called Barco, right? So Barco for teaching, so we don't have this sort of projectors and all the rest of it. You just Wi-Fi, you cast straight to the screen. It can take up to 5 different devices, Android, mobile phone, whatever you want. I just use the laptop through Barco. And students can interact with you directly on the screen. Right? So we can have a poll, all sorts of active learning technology, we can, devices, ways of learning we can use through the Barco system. Using something called Citrix, I won't say much about that. Now, cybersecurity is an important part. This idea of AI3, so it's a combination of assisted intelligence, making stuff work faster. Sally said something about this a minute ago. Augmented intelligence, better decisions, and this idea of autonomous intelligence, which you can imagine perhaps in 5 or 10 years' time, most student applications for UCAS are done by an AI, for example. And then finally, big data. We're generating tons of data. We're capturing, and I'll give you a little example now of the sort of data that we capture, tons and tons of data. How do we use that as a university to understand what the students are thinking, what they're doing, what the staff are behaving, what the staff are interested in, and how we can use big data to make better informed decisions to help run the university more efficiently. One example of this kind of augmented reality, this is in nursing, right? Now, nursing is not an area that's traditionally thought of as being at the leading edge of technology, but what we're doing here, we've got a whole series of these devices, is a virtual hospital. So you put the headset on and you go, and just an example of how you can cast this, the Barco system will see what she sees. So just very briefly, I hope this is the one, you'll see that she's going into a hospital looking at a young child who's poorly, and she can ask the child a series of questions, and the questions will come back, and on the back of that she'll make a diagnosis, and that diagnosis could be tested, and she gets it right or she gets it wrong, and learns from either of those two outcomes. So you can see what she's seeing on the screen, on the bigger screen. So there's the child there. So she can examine that child, look into the child's eyes. A sort of a menu will come down of activities that she can make a diagnosis with, etc. She can walk across the hospital. So without going, so the idea that universities need loads of space to do things isn't quite right anymore. You can do it all on a little set like this. She could walk around an entire hospital inside a small headset and see dozens of patients, elderly, young people, whatever it happens to be, just using a headset. Right? That's a great thing to be able to do because it saves a lot of money, doesn't it, on universities, on estates costs. We can look at monitoring movement. So every student has one of these, a tab,
It's a bit like the Oyster card, you walk through, the gate will only open, you can only get into the campus if you've got a smart card, right? Because it's an open campus, so we can monitor who's on, who's off. There are policing issues across the university. It's open to the public because there's a public right of way through it, so we need to protect the students and the staff from people who might want to come in and cause mischief, and some do, to be blunt. So we've got the Salto system, but because we're recording where people are, we can start to develop heat maps. So each of those red dots, that's a person in universities. We can start to know where people are and where they're clustering, so you can develop a heat map across the university. And this is quite good for just-in-time timetabling, for example. Quite a lot of universities are very good at timetabling lecture rooms, and a lecturer doesn't turn up, or students don't turn up, there's some kind of confusion. Well, we can pick that up more or less instantly with this kind of just-in-time timetabling through the heat maps. We can see where people are. And again, if there's an incident, there's a fire, we know where people are, we can get them out quickly, all through the mapping of the system. Now, buses might sound a bit boring. Who cares about buses? Well, our students do, because up until the Waterside, they could park on campus. They got really fed up, some of them, when they realised they couldn't park there. We've got to park and ride. So the bus network is really important. They want to know where the buses are, when they're going to turn up. So we've got our own bus company called Uno Buses. Again, those purple dots at any one time show you where the buses are across the town centre network, so the students can be assured that the bus will turn up and they'll get to their lecture on time, because that's rightly so a cause of stress. You're on the park and ride. If the bus doesn't turn up, you're going to be late. You might be in trouble. So understanding and mapping out using GIS integrated with the other software, what the traffic system's like across the town is an important part of a smart campus and the student experience. Plus, the buses are kitted out. They've all got Wi-Fi in, and they've got chargers and the rest of it, because they want their phones charged and their laptops, essentially. So that helps as well. Social media analytics. Again, you've probably done some of this. We had a dinner about just before Christmas, and we just look at the tweets. It's called the Changemaker Hub dinner, and you can just see what people are saying about us. It's really helpful, this sort of stuff. This is all good news, by the way. They're saying, what a great evening I had. You can see this is night time now. Okay, there's not many tweets. You can look at the bar along here. They'll be waking up in a minute and start to tweet again. So you can get a sort of a feeling for the lifetime or the half-life of an activity that you put on at the university as an event. Not only that, how well it was supported and what people are actually saying. Because if they're all saying bad things about you, right, you might want to know and take some action that helps to mitigate what they're saying. That's a good news story. We've had some bad news stories at university around toasters. I won't go into it. Call it Toastergate, which caused eruption across social media. And we needed to be able to monitor that and control it. And with this social media analytics, it allows us to get an insight into what the students and staff are saying, good and bad, about the university. Right, a few really techie ones before I start to wind up. You might not be able to see that particularly well at the back. This is what the Cisco system looks like under the bonnet, effectively. We've got a whole bunch of access points. We've got 1,615 of them across the university estate in halls of residence. We can interrogate each of those access points at any one time to find out what operating system is being used. Right? So in the first, if you look down there, you can see the second, where it says number 10, APCH, that's a hall of residence. You've got 19 people on there using 66.7 gigabytes. So you can start to get a feel for the usage of the system and the amount of traffic flowing in and flowing out. Not just that, look at the operating system, what they're using, Microsoft Workstation, iPhone, Android, etc., etc. That's quite useful information. We can go further. This way you have to be careful because you instantly run into GDPR rules. That's why that big green bar is there, because you can't see who those people are, because they could be identified. Right? They are students. We can look at the applications, the different local area networks that are being used, and the client. So a client there would be a particular individual. So the number one client, and this is the 15th of the 1st, 2019 at 4:15 in the afternoon, in a hall of residence is an individual on a Sony PS4 taking up 190.9 gigabytes of data. Probably gaming, obviously. But you start to see where the big action is across the university. What hall of residence has got the most gamers, for example. And once you know that, you can put in more Wi-Fi to help them. Because believe you me, if they're not logging on, that's part of the student experience. They can't log on at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning and start gaming with somebody in China. You're going to know about that quickly. Right? That's as much as part of the student experience as some of the teaching and learning that we get excited about for obvious reasons. Okay then, so here's a question. Let's go a bit active now. There's a bar chart here, 7th of January 2019. This is a snapshot of the application hits in 24 hours across universities. So they've just come back, right? They're probably not involved in formal lectures just yet, but this is what they really consume, because we can find out, because we can interrogate the system. So what do you think the biggest bar there would be? Facebook, yeah, possibly, yeah. The virtual learning environment, you think they're all studiously studying away? Yeah, like dream on. There's some interesting ones in here, right? And I'll show you got it right first time, actually. Hope you can see that's a Facebook by a long mile. It was the biggest application they were using. YouTube, huge into YouTube. QQ, anybody know what QQ is? You should do. Chinese, it's Tencent QQ, right? It's a social messaging site, Chinese. Right? QQ, very popular with your Chinese students. They're using it all the time. BT, torrent, that's just a kind of file sharing. Games, Bilibili. Any takers on Bilibili? Again, it's a bit like a Chinese sort of Facebook. Right, so clearly at this point in time, a lot of Chinese students saying lots of stuff to each other around the world about how, well, about their whatever they're saying. There's an interesting one there, wasn't there? What's the third one in? It is what you think it is, yeah. So about 1,000 users on a porn site that particular day. Or one person. I don't know. It wasn't me, by the way. The thing is, talking about this can get you into a bit of trouble. I gave a talk about this, I think some of you might have been there, at the QAA meeting called Data Matters in January. And I said some of this stuff, perhaps a bit too casually, although nothing was in breach. Look who picked it up. Right, this is the headline from the Daily Mail the following Sunday. Sinister new tech to spy on its students. Right? So there is a risk in all of this. Right? If you want to have a smart campus, right, and do interesting and creative stuff with the data, you're going to run headlong into people who are going to accuse you of all kinds of things. And, you know, let's be fair, there is an ethical dimension to this, and it's really important that universities, that we all get up to speed on what is possible and permissible and what isn't. The usual people are here sort of shaking the tree. If you read the Wrens, it's horrendous. It's some massive infringement of human rights and all the rest of it. Well, not really. We're just looking at a group of people using Facebook or not. But you can see how that would touch a nerve in some quarters. So it's really, really important that universities mitigate the risk if you want to go down this route using data to understand behaviours and application use better, that we are following ethical codes. And I know that JISC have got some stuff on this out there, and I'd recommend that you have a look at that if you haven't already. But just be warned, okay? It's not all exciting forefront stuff. There was a sting in the tail, and this was it on the 20th of the 1st, 2019. All right, then, just to sort of to pull it to a close, that's where we are now. What about the future? So we're looking at some areas. I'm not going to tell you all of them, but some of the areas that we're interested in around this idea of the fourth industrial revolution, of the fourth educational revolution, 4IE, and the digital university. I came across this recently. I thought it was quite interesting, actually. You all have seen Maslow's hierarchy. Well, this is one interpretation of what a newer generations perceive as their needs. It's interesting that bottom one, the psychological needs, that power, got to plug your laptop in, you haven't got that, oh my God, what do I do? And that's why our buses have all of those sorts of things. And the Hall of Residence need to be powered up as well. Wi-Fi, absolutely essential. Safety needs, belonging, esteem, and at the top, this notion of self-actualization. You'll either find that exciting or depressing. I'm not quite sure what to make of it myself, actually, but this is a snapshot of where the world is. And so as IT specialists and HR people and those interested in the student experience, we need to be taking this sort of stuff on board as Generation X starts to wash up at our universities. My particular area is this interface between the social world, so social impact, how can universities add social value to the students and the communities that they serve, versus looking to the future. So on this diagram of our strategy, the bit where the future focus and social impact overlap, that Venn diagram bit, that slither, I think it's a really interesting space. You know, what do we do in there? And how does digital help social? You know, who knows? I mean, you've got some example there from the nursing side, but what about more generally across the community? We've been looking at this idea of a blockchain educational passport. So the thing on your right there is a paper, position paper that we published on this, which tries to bridge that future-focused and social impact gap. And where we see there's great opportunity for universities to get into this space is linking up with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, for example. Okay, so this passport that you develop can bridge mass online education and perhaps smart technology delivery in an innovative way. So MOOCs aren't going to reach these kids. Right? EduLearn won't reach those children out there in Africa, wherever they happen to be. Right? But something more bespoke could, a distributed learning ledger with kind of micro-accreditations, a permanent record of what they've done. If they're in a war-torn area, that could be lost. How do you record that digitally? So digital and social kind of coming together in a way that MOOCs can't do. That fits well, I think, with these are the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 4 is quality education. Number 1 is reduction in poverty. Number 5 is gender equality. Right? So technology can be used to address these really interesting, chunky questions. And universities, I think, should be at the forefront of doing this stuff. It's a real challenge for the sector. We're not quite there, but we could be, and I think we should be. This is how this developed for us. We went to the United Nations, actually, and we said, look, we've got this idea. They funded it. It was called Unite Ideas, and we developed a passport, a blockchain educational passport for Syrian refugee kids in camps in Lebanon as a pilot, and it worked. Okay, so there's massive opportunity in this space, as I said, for universities. Right, so just kind of put it together. How does this all link to our strategy? Well, we see bluntly IT as a piece of competitive advantage for the University of Northampton. We're going to start working on Microsoft Power BI. We're going to bring a lot of these things together. All of the data we've got into a single dashboard. That's the Salto stuff, which shows you where students are across the university and staff, the network data, VLE usage, security incidents, learner analytics, just-in-time, a whole bunch of stuff, heat maps, to shape holistic decision-making. Why would we do that? So we can fulfill our mission as a university, be impactful, and transform into a digital world. All right. That's great, isn't it? I'm going to say all that stuff, aren't I? Because I would do. Because my job as a keynote is to represent University of Northampton and tell you how great it all is and all the rest of it. But it's not always great, is it? So this is the honesty piece, right? There's a gap in my university, probably in all of our universities, between how the world sees you, right, as a leader in IT, and what really happens on the ground. Whether you're really levering the opportunities. We had an outage last week. The network went down for a couple of hours. And it only takes 1 or 2 of those before staff start losing faith and trust in the IT systems. It doesn't take much to do damage. It's a long, long time to repair that. Okay, so the story on the outside is not always the same as the story inside. So keeping the show running, absolutely important. So just be aware of that. There is a gap often between what is claimed and what really takes place by and large in the university. Right. Lighten the mood a bit now. We thought about how we could represent our story at Northampton, the 5 years of transition, all the sort of stuff that's gone on. We put together a little film. It's 3 minutes long, and it's a whole bunch of clips from famous movies that you'd have seen over the years, right? And this is the active piece now, okay? Active. What I want you to watch out for are some things that happened over the 5 years of this project. And it starts off, bluntly, with total disbelief. Right? When we went to say to stakeholders, people who would fund the project, and staff, that we're going to build a brand new university, it was either disbelief or outright dismissal. Right? You're mad. What are you thinking? From the inside and from the outside world as well. When you start pushing it, after about 6 or 8 months, people think, maybe they're serious. Maybe they really think they're going to do this. And that's when you start to heat things up a bit. When people realize it might actually happen, they can get a bit upset, they can get very excited. You start to see some kind of external resistance coming through. There was one stage we had a vote of no confidence against us from parts of the union at University of Northampton, because they thought we were doing such a reckless thing as to move the university from one place to another and redefine it in a 21st century mode. Also from external regulating bodies. HEFCE was around at the time, and I'll be careful what I say, but they weren't too helpful initially when we went to them with this proposal. There's a stage we were working with 37 external agencies simultaneously, right? The Environment Agency, Highways, Roads, British Gas, British Telecom, all wanting different things, right? Delivered more or less simultaneously, all charging you a lot of money, or most of them a lot of money, for services that they probably couldn't deliver for the next 12 months down the line. Right? So a lot of plates spinning, and that's a stage when you can easily just walk away and not bother with it. We had to raise the money. We got most of the money, lion's share, is a bond, which was about £230 million. We had to raise that off our own backs. It wasn't so straightforward. We had one major incident that nearly toppled the project, and you'll see that in the film as well. So we want to watch out for these 6 things, as the 3-minute film shows. Right? You've got to keep the faith, right? Just keep going. You know, best not to listen to advice, is my opinion. just keep going. And once the buildings come out of the ground, the whole mood changes, because people don't believe it until they can see it. There's many fancy fly-throughs and architect's diagrams and models as you want, but you've got to actually stand there and see the concrete frame emerging before you think, actually, this probably is going to happen now. And things start to change. And we ended up, well, not quite over the rainbow. You'll probably get that will come up in the film. Certainly south of the River Nen. We were north beforehand. What's going to come up, I have to say, the disclaimer, there's no one in this movie clips, no one here who represents anybody living or dead. Mostly. The volume's good on this as well.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
If you build it, he will come.
I don't think that's a good idea.
It is a barren wasteland.
What a vivid imagination.
I'm... building something.
What say you?
You making some kind of joke?
No.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
What is this?
How'd he do that?
My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Well, what is it you want?
We want a shrubbery!
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
O Knights of Nick, we have brought you your shrubbery. May we go now?
Firstly, you must find another shrubbery!
Not another shrubbery. Down with this sort of thing.
Careful now.
Down with this sort of thing.
You're tearing me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Use the force, Luke. Let go.
Show me the money! That's it, brother, but you got to yell that shit! Show me the money! Show me the money!
Start your engine.
Hey, we've got a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
To infinity and beyond!
Toto? I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yep. So did you get some of the something? Certainly not in Kansas, that's for sure. Right, the final slide then. This is a great quote from Buckminster Fuller. This kind of summarises in a soundbite what we kind of did and what we were lucky enough to be able to do. Okay, you never change things by fighting the resisting reality. Change something, build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. That was our culture change piece. It was a bit ruthless in some respects. There wasn't a vast amount of persuasion needed because we're just building a new thing, and you either come or you don't. And that was a sort of method that we'd use in this particular instance. Of course, can't do it. I want to just acknowledge a few really great colleagues at university with us, and subsequently some of them left, but they played a major role, those people there. Thank you to those, and thank you to you for listening. Thank you very much. Oh, there is. Okay, all right. I thought. Okay, so yeah, thank you. So, 10 minutes. If anyone's got any questions, happy to take. Yes, at the back, sir. I think it's the bring your own device piece and the ability for students. We get about maybe 30% of our students come from London and they commute in, and some of them work. And so that retention piece is really, really important for us. And so allowing them more flexibility in the way that they study and consume information through the technology has been will be a real game changer for us.
Thank you. As the students read the article and they realized how much of the data was being consumed, was there any backlash from the student population? How did they react?
No, there isn't. I mean, bluntly, anybody who uses Facebook hasn't really got a leg to stand on in some of this. You know, it says you give your data away constantly throughout your working day. Walking past a shop, you probably you're on your phone. So I'm afraid that's the world we live in. But I take the meaning of your question seriously, because you don't want to alienate the student body in a way that you could do if you blundered into this idea in a crude way. So you have to keep people with you, obviously, to keep students with you. There was no response whatsoever from the article. In fact, it just fizzled out, really, because it was kind of a something over nothing. But it was a kind of wake-up call for me, really, thinking when you're even speaking about this now, and there may well be people in the room who are a bit suspicious. You know, there might be another journalist article that comes out on the back of this. It's very hard to keep it reasonable. If that's the right word to use, reasonable sounding, when if you want to make sort of mischief about how data is being used, then we're probably providing some ammunition.
Fantastic that you had the opportunity to build an entirely new site. What advice would you give to an organisation that was trying to transform with its existing footprint?
Yeah, I think it is hard to do that because you're always going to be in a two-phase place, if that makes sense. You know, so I'm just glad we weren't in that situation, bluntly. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do it. You know, you just have to do it incrementally, or over perhaps a longer time scale. But don't be afraid not to, just because you will potentially have a slightly two-stream, organisation for perhaps a couple of years while the rest catches up. There's a guy over here.
Nathan Priss, Falmouth University. Did you, in your blended and your active learning approach, did you have to start to define a new learning and teaching strategy? How did you get the academics on board with that piece? Because obviously that's quite transformational. Yeah, well, I think actually it wasn't such a. It might have over-egged it. So it might sound more than it actually was. A lot of staff were doing it already, certainly in the school education area, because they're at the forefront teacher training. So they were kind of right at the forefront of this and pioneers.
And they helped roll out the message. So if you're slightly skeptical, a bit worried in, I don't know, history or something, and how do I do this stuff? And you get a colleague from another part of the university saying, don't worry, it works like this. That provides massive reassurance. So I think the best, we kind of middle sort of managerial task finish groups are the way to get, across faculty groups, to get people working on this. Because often there's great practice going on in one part of the university, and over here they never heard of it. So our job is to pull those things together.
You also mentioned the digital skills for the students. How do you record that or score it, or whichever way you to prove that they are engaging?
We've not been hugely prescriptive about that. I mean, and it'll be different from different areas, right? So computing, doing software design, you'll have a different view of the world than in I don't know, fine art, for example. But even there, it's up to the lecturers themselves when they devise a curriculum to have a way to record that. So for instance, in digital design, in graphics, it's using some kind of software. I mean, in fashion, the fashion shoe design, which is quite popular for us, they use CAD, so an engineering software package to design shoes, and they 3D print them. Right? So that is a sort of approach that you take, not making them testing them 5 out of 10 on if they can write code or something. It's just applying it to the subject that they're studying in an innovative way.
Thank you. Excellent piece of interdisciplinary work there.
Well, where is he?
School of Ventriloquism, I think. Excellent piece of interdisciplinary work there, as you're mentioning the shoe fashion and the engineering side. In your blending the teaching and learning, do you cross over the disciplines there so that part of, say, the shoe fashion course is delivered from within another area?
Definitely. That is, I mean, the way that we design, so there's no, perhaps I should have said, there's no identifiable faculties or schools in the university, right? You can't walk into a business school, it doesn't exist. Everything is sort of mashed up. And so all of the academic staff are in open plan offices, and many of them are hot desking, right? So they're all sitting together, they sit down, and that has been fantastic, because that's allowed people who've never met before to start having a conversation that could lead to a new product, a new course, a new piece of innovation or research. And that's gone down very, very well indeed, that idea of opening up borders. Yep. I should say I'm open plan office as well. I'm not living in some massive tower with leather sofas and chauffeurs. So the Office of Vice Chancellor went open plan 3 or 4 years before the rest of the university was going to do that. In fact, half the professional service staff, well, half the university are open plan anyway. Many of the academics are sort of 5 or 6 in a room. So it actually wasn't such a big step to go fully open plan for the entire organisation. But provided massive dividends, not least in terms of cost saving around the estate. If you look at office usage, it's about 10-15% across the year. If you're going to build a brand new thing from scratch, why on earth would you bake in that level of inefficiency? We couldn't afford it. We wouldn't want to do it anyway. So that's why the open plan was the only way forward. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Just thinking how the cultural change program worked, going from the old to the new.
Yeah, it was the culture. I mean, there's a lot of stuff talked about this cultural change, and I know there's different ways on how it works. I mean, our experience really was we just said it's going to happen, right? We're going to build this new university. We're going to go open plan. If you don't like it, there's an exit route for it. It wasn't quite as blunt as that, but we didn't spend. We didn't tie ourselves in knots in endless consultations, put it that way. Yeah. How did it work? Well, I think most staff realised that it was an exciting project. At the dean level and the sub-dean level and subject leaders, lots of kind of working groups looking at how the active blended learning model could be implemented. Rightly so, nervousness about that, and some absolute cynicism. But as I said, the best way to deal with that is not like me saying it, because I'm going to say what I'm going to say. It's actually somebody in education who's been doing this for special needs kids saying, no, this is how it works. And it works brilliantly. Look at the test results. Look at the evidence base. So that was the key, really,
to convince people who were sceptical. And also allowing them people to go at different speeds. You know, we had a 3-year rolling programme to transform the teaching and learning curriculum through active blended learning. So 3 years is a long time, you know, to do. So some people who are slightly nervous could move at a different speed, and that was fine. But we've set targets across the organisation every year that's sort of 50%, 60%, 90% completion. It had to be 100% by the beginning of 2018 because there wasn't a plan B. So that was it. We just had to do it. Okay.
That was excellent, so much to kind of think about. Makes me kind of want to rebuild a campus from scratch. We've got 10 minutes now for kind of travel time, so if you want to start...